video about history. Today I was a little bit jolted first by a bee, like a zzz kind of bee, and also I read somewhere that a person named William Dalrymple, who has written many books on India, said that in essence, the rise of WhatsApp universities was caused by the lack of engagement of Indian academics. And this coming from a British person, I'm just like, I forgot how tone deaf people are sometimes. Anyways, I am not ethnically from anywhere in the subcontinent, but I still feel like the rage when these types of things happen, especially like after this recent US election. So I will be reading from Dr. Ishita Banerjee Dube ma'am's article in the Subaltern Studies writing, since also Mr. Dalrymple also attacked the Subaltern School, which I'm a huge fan of. So I felt like it was appropriate to read this part of her chapter as a kind of response, you can say. I've never met her in person, but she seems like a very learned person. So, authoritative histories. The initiative to write an official history of Mahima Dharma was taken by Bishwanath Baba, the leader of the Balkaldaris. The Balkaldaris. His Satya Mahima Dharma Itihasa appeared in 1935. It sought to give the Mahima Dharmis an authentic past and accorded the Guru the dignity of chronology, temporality, and new historicity. The Guru, who had stood beyond history, was now situated in tradition. At the same time, this history was used to establish the divinity of the preceptor. Thus, the itihasa drew upon but also exceeded the concerns of, quote, rational historiography, unquote. It moved seamlessly between Western notions of history and the earlier Indian conceptions of Puran itihasa, combining an attention to chronology and temporality with a belief in the divinity of Mahima Swami. The founder of the sect was situated within tradition but outside history. The itihasa recorded in chronological sequence the self-willed lila, sport, or play of the God incarnate who had appeared on earth for a brief period to preach the true faith. The authority of the itihasa thus derived from the very nature of its content. Its canonicity was defined in terms of the preceptor. The intertwining of history and itihasa produced interesting and contradictory consequences. The written authoritative itihasa froze events in time and sought to present a singular history by gathering multiple parts unto itself, by ruling out divergent voices, by recording fluid occurrences as established facts. At the same time, it was also the written nature of the text that took the divine guru as its sole point of reference, which opened the itihasa to further readings and renderings, other fluidities. The itihasa also consolidated Bishwanath Baba's position as the leader of the faith. The opening passage of the Itihasa informs the reader that before Bishwanath Baba embarked on the project of writing a history of the sect, several persons had taken up the task but had failed. The failure had but one explanation. The Guru had not willed them to succeed. Clearly, Bishwanath Baba was endowed with the Ashirwad blessings of the Guru. He was also armed with the trust of the Mahima Dharmis, prominent citizens prominent citizens of Orissa, teachers at the prestigious Ravenshaw College at Cuttack had urged him to take up the venture. The credentials of the author stood established. The Itihasa moved on to authenticate the veracity of its contents. The material for the text, which described the life, activities, and teachings of Mahima Swami, had been collated from the author's long association and detailed discussion with the first line of sannyasis, also called siddhas, the enlightened ones, the direct disciples of and constant companions of Mahima Swami. The dialogue had cleared all doubts and ambiguities relating to the Nishkama Lila, unattached sport of the Prabhu Lord. The Siddhas were also the source of information about the period that followed the death of the founder, about the Sabha general meeting organized after the Swami's death that took the decision of initiating the Mahima Gaddi and the further functioning of the Gaddi over the next several decades. Finally, Bishwanath Baba was not a mere observer but an active participant in the affairs of the Gaddi after the time of the Siddhas. The itihasa was an authentic record of what had been witnessed and experienced by the sadhus, renouncers, and bhaktas of Mahima Dharma. This history took as its major task a description of the Swami's Nishkama Lila on earth. It highlighted his miraculous powers and his charismatic personality, which overwhelmed all high and low. Mahima Swami's Lila was self-willed, but it was performed after the repeated entreaties of siddhas, sadhus, rishis, munis, and gods to re-establish Satya Dharma, true faith in the world. Munis meaning self-realized and pious renouncers. The figure of Mahima Swami was fashioned out of the elements of the Vedantic, Vaishnavite, and Shaivite traditions within Hinduism. The Satya Dharma preached by Mahima Swami was the essence of Sanatan Hindu Dharma. The new faith was declared to be pristine Hinduism as it had existed before the advent of the Kali Yuga, the era of evil. Sanatan means eternal, and you may hear it a lot these days because of the rise of so-called WhatsApp universities and stuff. The itihasa codified the teachings of the Swami and demarcated the different sets of rules he had established for the two categories of bhaktas, grihis and sannyasis. The monastic order had three layers. The lowest rung was made up of the bhairagis who had just renounced the world. They were to serve the sannyasis, stay on the path of renunciation, acquire knowledge of the Shastras, scriptures, and develop their power of meditation. The apara sannyasis, a new term coined for the kalpindharis, which meant renouncers who are yet to attain perfection, constituted the intermediate layer. They were obliged at each step to demonstrate their devotion to the Siddha Para Sannyasis, renouncers who have attained perfection and self-realization, the Bal Kaldaris. Their minds had to be calm. These measures allowed them to learn the Shastras and understand the full import of the Guru's teachings. All this was supervised by the Parasanyasis, their teachers and guides, who also decided on their elevation to the ranks of the Siddhas. The Parasanyasis, who represented the highest mode of being, were warned of the dangers of unjustly exploiting their superior status. They were to remain absolutely detached from all passions, aspirations, and acquisitive instincts. They were prohibited from accumulating money, building their own ashramas, and residing there permanently as gurus or mahants, and from starting their paramparas, line of succession. Their task was to teach the people to pray to one and only Guru, the Absolute. Even as the itihasa history reinforced hierarchy and gradation, it also stated that all members of an order were equal, and the members were asked to display mutual respect for and to honor each other. Vishwanath Baba's canonical text, in reiterating Mahima Swami's insistence on detachment, also decried the attempts of the Kalpindaris to create a rival Samaj. The itihasa seized upon the decision to construct the Samadhi of Mahima Swami as an act which fulfilled the wish of the Guru. Anam Das Baba, a Balkaldari sage, had a vision of the finished Mandir temple in his dreams. It was to be 12 cubits high, adorned with 7 hooded snakes on top, and surrounded by 4 boundary walls. It was also the explicit desire of the Prabhu that Nanda Baba offered the first services at the Samadhi Mandir. All this is significant. The vision of the Mandir, the right to perform niti, and the order of precedence in the offering of the first service all lay with the Balkaldharis. The present weighed heavily on the past. Significantly, it was Nanda Baba who later granted Balkal to 56 sannyasis and stirred the dissensions in the community. Was the Prabhu's desire that Nanda Baba offer the first service at the Samadhi Mandir not an expression of the special place of this sannyasi within Mahima Dharma? Did not the command prime and prepare Nanda Baba to initiate the second line of Balkaldharis? Was it then possible to doubt the veracity of the Shunya Bhani message from the void that impelled Nanda Baba to give some Kalpindari sannyasis the gift of Balkal? The ground had been prepared. The grant of Balkal to the 56 sannyasis was treated in the text as an ordinary incident. One paragraph devoid of rhetorical flourishes mentioned that the Shunya Bhani as a matter of discourse and went on to list the names of the new initiates. The disagreements and dissensions of the past were erased from the picture. Where indeed was the need? The Lord himself had initiated the process of gradation and promotion among the sannyasis. The reordered past legitimated the present. Clearly, the itihasa argued the superior status and the spiritual achievements of the Balkaldharis had put them in charge of the Mahima Gadi. Entrusted with the supervision and management of the Gaddi, they alone had the right of entry to the inner sanctum of the Gaddi Mandir, the memorial of the Guru, and was to them alone that the conduct of prayers and services were trusted. The task of the Kalpindharis, on the other hand, was to sweep and clean the outer compound. By the way, if you have been following, Indian spirituality on social media, you may have noticed that there is a really cool shrine called Kedarnath. And I was actually also planning to go there. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it because in 2022, there was a lot of rain and disruptions, etc. Many of the videos do not show the inner sanctum of Kedarnath. So I think this is also similar in its hierarchy. I might be wrong, but I've never seen a video of... Wait, I have seen videos of it inside, but then they're not as frequently appearing in the timeline as compared to people standing outside. So yeah, it's a very significant thing to be noted for those who are interested. As for the inner compound, they could stand near the gate and supply the provisions needed for niti to the Balkaldharis. The Kalpindharis were enjoined to accept the Siddha Babas as their spiritual guides and to honor and follow their preceptors' wishes and dictates in their day-to-day lives. All this was implicit in their designation of dasa, servants. They were the servants followers of both Mahima Prabhu and of the Balkaldhari sannyasis. The Balkaldharis were the Babas and the supreme mode of being, who in their very modesty have often added the suffix of das to their names to signify their obedience to the Absolute. The itihasa firmly etched the norms and hierarchies of the Mahima Dharma Samaj, claiming to base itself on the teachings of a founder who had derided hierarchy and discrimination. Court matters. The authoritative modes of inscription of the text meant that the Oriya literati came to accept it as an authentic history of the sect. What is more important, it became the point of reference for practitioners of law. So far as evidence was concerned, the court accorded the written itihasa a position superior to that of the oral testimony of the witnesses. The Balkaldharis gained the edge over the Kalpindaris. This is evident in the first important award dated 11th December 1947, found in the court records. The award began by expressing the arbitrator's concern at the long-standing dispute between the two groups at the Joranda Alik Gadi and voiced their eagerness to resolve it since the split stood as an impediment to the progress of the religious order. This is a quote. The Babas themselves were anxious to bring about peace and consolidation. Footnote 25. This award was framed by the arbitrators Swami Bichitrananda Das, Sri Satyanarayan Sen Gupta, and Sri Jai Krishna Mitra. later replaced by Sri Paresh Mahanti, who were all advocates from Cuttack. This award, with slight modifications, was incorporated in a second award on 13th January 1950 and was executed on stamped paper on 25th August 1950 by the same arbitrators. I came across a typescript of these records in the archives of the Orissa Research Project in the South Asia Institute, Heidelberg, Germany. They're entitled Joranda Selections from Religious Endowments. The Babas themselves were anxious to bring about peace and consolidation between them. With this end in view, Ramchandra Das on behalf of Balkaldharis and Dharmananda Das on behalf of Kaupindari signed an agreement on 20 March 1947. All disputes were referred to the arbitrators, and both parties agreed to abide by their award. The arbitrators in turn were satisfied that Ramchandra Das and Dharmananda Das were proper representatives of their groups. The presence of lawyers and witnesses were sought at both the time of the agreement and at all stages of the hearing. The hearing commenced on 26 October 1947 and was held on the daily basis. The arguments of both sides were heard at length, and due consideration was given to their statements and to the evidence they adduced. The arbitrators stated that they had taken great care to frame a just and proper award. The first clause of the award vested sole authority over all property in the Gaddi. This included all structure that exists or may be built on the land belonging to the Gaddi, all structures built or to be built anywhere else, and any other property that might have been or be acquired by any of the Mahima Dharmi sannyasis. It further stated no sannyasis should have any personal interest in the rights vested in the Gaddi. The award ruled against the presence of rival institutions within the Gaddi complex. The prohibition on self-acquisition by sannyasis was declared to be one of the cardinal principles of Mahima Dharma. The sannyasis were permitted to collect bhiksha, alms, to meet emergencies, but they were not allowed to retain more than 5 rupees for themselves. And the remainder was to be the property of the Gaddi. At the same time, they were granted the right to make certain collections for purposes of dharmshalas, lodging houses for pilgrims, to be erected for public purposes, which in turn would be the property of the Gaddi. The Gaddi was also to inherit the properties, if any, of all the para and apara sannyasis on their death. There can be no claim of personal inheritance or inheritance by disciples. The institutional establishment of the Samadhi, the Mahima Gaddi, as the central institution of Mahima Dharma was complete. The processes which had begun after the death of Mahima Swami had reached their culmination through the intervention of legal procedures. The Mahima Gaddi had replaced the Guru as the prime authority. It managed the affairs of the faith and gave guidance to the bhaktas. The Gaddi, propped up and legitimated by the award, became the sole owner of all properties that Mahima Dharmi sannyasis had acquired and would acquire in the future. A religiosity solidified into a religion with its key institutions, ceremonies, and rituals. There were strong injunctions against the accumulation of wealth by individual members, but there was no ceiling on the extent of the Gaddi's possessions. By the way, someone with a sweater or overalls wear titled Fear of God State stabbed like a bunch of Chinese people and Vietnamese, I guess, in Little Saigon. I'm not sure because they haven't written all of the victims' names, but in Seattle. So yeah, religion. There were strong injunctions against the accumulation of wealth by individual members, but no ceiling on the extent of the Gaddi's possessions. The sannyasis were in fact encouraged to make certain collections for public purposes. This was a consequence of the establishment of Mahima Dharma as an institutionalized order. Thus, from the late 1870s, the Dharma had gradually moved from practicing absolute and complete detachment toward property to controlling and regulating the acquisitive tendencies of its members. The award gave formal recognition to the fact that property had become a critical contentious issue among the renouncers of Mahima Dharma, and also charted a terrain for the further conduct of the ascetics. The use of the term para and apara in the award revealed an uncritical acceptance of the categories introduced by Bishwanath Baba in the Itihasa. The primacy and privileged position of the Balkaldharis was clearly recognized and inscribed in the award. Para sannyasis are exclusively held to be entitled to offer service at the ashtan, inner sanctum of the Gadi Mandir, to which none other should have access, but the other sannyasis are not debarred from rendering such assistance in services as they are carrying on at present. The para sannyasis were, of course, the Balkaldharis. The Kalpindaris, the stragglers, were deemed as yet other sannyasis. Their separate constructions were declared to be illegal. Illegal immigrants. Oh my God. Bishwanath Baba's texts, particularly the Itihasa, had succeeded in projecting the Balkaldharis as the true representatives of Mahima Dharma. The award underwrote the legitimacy of the norms, rules, and practices developed by the Balkaldharis and gave unqualified support to their system of gradation, promotion, and hierarchy within Mahima Dharma. Similarly, the other conditions of the award clarified and expanded the stand of the arbitrators. All the para sannyasis were to have an equal status among themselves. They were entitled to reciprocal saranmanya, a practice of touching each other's feet to show respect. The story of the relations between the para and apara sannyasis, however, was a little different. We recommend that latter should show saranmanya to the former, and this should grow up as a practice by mutual consent. End quote. It is in fact striking how lawyers, judges, and arbitrators, in the course of their involvement with the dispute between the Mahima Dharmi sannyasis, increasingly assume the responsibility of defining and interpreting the nature and the rules of the faith. In this case, the arbitrators recommended that a gesture of respect to the para sannyasis should grow up as a practice. They went further when they stated there's a bunch of rules as well as like Purnima rituals. And then the author continues, the shift from one grade of asceticism to another was made conditional upon rigid frames of time. The candidates for promotion were to be judged on the basis of a set standard, a knowledge of all the existing books on Mahima Dharma for apara sannyasis aspiring to be para sannyasis, and a fair standard of knowledge about Mahima Dharma for Bhairagis applying for apara sannyasi status. The system of gradation and promotion was given the further fixity of formal examinations, like Hogwarts in Harry Potter. This emphasis on textual knowledge highlights the mutations that the sect had undergone since the time of Mahima Swami. Mahima Swami had left no writing. Instead, in legend history, he had endowed Bhima Bhoi with the gift of poetry for the propagation of his ideas and had sent scribes to the blind bard to note down his inspired utterances. Bhima Bhoi's creations were in the form of bhajans and stutis, which were meant to be sung and recited. During Mahima Swami's lifetime and for a long time after, there were only written texts. They were the only written texts of the faith. The cultural world of Mahima Swami and Bhima Bhoi was grounded in the matrices of orality. Mahima Swami's fashioning as the founder of Mahima Dharma had been premised upon processes of orality, and Bhima Bhoi's works had drawn upon and enriched oral traditions. Now the force of writing worked to subjugate orality. The urban literati had become an important and all-powerful support base for Mahima Dharma. Only a few became followers of the faith. The majority worked as advisors, consultants, and mediators. They codified and could create anew the rules, rituals, and practices of the faith. The written form increasingly informed the regulations of Mahima Dharma. After setting out detailed instructions on various aspects of the faith, the arbitrators entrusted Baba Dharmananda Das, Baba Bishwanath Das, and Baba Dinabandhu Das with the formulation of a code of rules not inconsistent with the provisions of the award. This code was to be followed by the Mahima Dharmis of different statuses. If the aforesaid persons cannot come to an agreed solution on any particular issue, they shall be referred to the Board of Arbitrators for final decision. The sannyasis who had managed the affairs at Mahima Gati were no longer the decision makers. Their roles had been taken over by the Board of Arbitrators. The lack of unanimity regarding the running of Mahima Dharma and the intervention of law courts and arbitrators to settle matters had led the sannyasis to forfeit on paper their rights of leadership and decision making. In actual practice, they often did not follow the dictates of the award. The choice of lawyers as arbitrators also spoke of the sannyasis' reliance on lawsuits and their faith in the statist modes of dispute settlement. The lawyers in turn applied themselves to their task with great zeal and ended up monopolizing the authority of settling all disputes and differences among the Mahima Dharmi sannyasis. Their decision on all these matters was to be binding and conclusive. A rival past. Next section. The Kalpindari reply to the strategies of the rival order, particularly Bishwanath Baba's Satya Mahima Dharma Itihasa, took the form of Mahindra Baba's Satya Mahima Dharma Sanksipta Itihasa. This was her 1994 University of Calcutta thesis that was not published. Okay, so the rival history was published in 1958. This marked the culmination of a series of measures adopted by the Kalpindaris to organize and strengthen their own Samaj. In the 1950s, energetic sadhus assumed the leadership of the Kalpindaris. The struggle against the Balkaldharis was now taken up with renewed vigor. The Kalpindari Samaj became more tightly organized. It secured its identity and began to counteract the moves of the Balkhaldaris. The Kalpindari Mahima Samaj Satya Mahima Dharma Alochana or Prachar Sabha was set up. Other sabhas and samitis, meetings and committees were organized, and the tasks of propagation of the faith and proselytization were attended to in earnest. The Kalpindari Samaj asserted itself by attending to a sharp clarification of its difference with the Apara sannyasis of the Balkaldari Samaj. The conventional Kalpin loincloth was replaced by a longer piece of cloth which reached the knees, and a chadar, a piece of cloth which covered the upper body. The Kalpindaris gained in strength by discarding the Kalpin. They differentiated themselves clearly from the wearers of loincloth who were part of the Balkaldari Samaj and were subservient to the Balkaldari sannyasis. This change of dress came to signify a heightened consciousness of the Kalpindaris, their complete independence from the Balkaldharis. Similarly, the group played with the tenets of Mahima Dharma to identify Bhima Boy's Ekashara, single letter, with Omkar, the first sound of Hinduism. The appearance of Mahindra Baba's Satya Mahima Dharma Shankshipta Itihasa was signaling the coming of age of the Kalpindari Samaj. The text cleverly drew upon and subverted Bishwanath Baba's Itihasa. The introduction drew attention to the crucial role of history in the existence of Samaj and Jati, community and nation. Moreover, an Itihasa which recorded the life and deeds of Yogeshwara, Lord of Yoga, Mahima Prabhu, was of vital importance to the bhaktas of the faith, a source of inspiration in times of distress, which enabled them to hold steadfast to the path of Satya Dharma, true faith. Finally, it was argued that Bishwanath Baba's Itihasa and a host of other texts published before the 1950s had not fulfilled the expectations of the bhaktas. These texts lacked substantial authoritative discussions on the faith. They were devoid of distinction, and statements often contradicted the fundamental principles of the Dharma. Mahindra Baba's short Itihasa filled these gaps and redressed the imbalance. In this text, the account of Mahima Swami from the moment of his appearance in Orisha in 1826 through to the time he started preaching Satya Dharma after a long sadhana meditation of 36 years, closely followed Vishwanath Baba's itihasa. At the time, there were significant variations. Mahima Swami was described as Ajoni Shambhuta, one not born of a womb, and Yogeshwara, but the term Ishvara Purusha was left out. When he gained repute as Dhuliel Gosain, saint covered in dust ashes, his garment was a Gairik Kopin, a saffron loincloth. These variations tallied with Bhima Bhoi's description of the Swami in Stuti Chintamani. Indeed, at the age of 4, Bhima Bhoi had come across an ascetic traveling through villages. He wore a kasha kalpin and his arms bore the signs of a sankha and chakra disc. This ascetic is widely identified as Mahima Swami, the future preceptor of Bhima Bhoi. The Sankshipta Itihasa did not mention that the Guru had changed his besh garment and later taken to wearing balkal instead of kalpin. Was this a gentle reminder that there was little to distinguish between these garments? The details rehearsed by Mahendra Baba were part of a pattern. If the text hinted that Mahima Swami's first disciple was given balkal, it also provided an interesting vignette which placed the beginning of the Kalpindhari order right at the time of Mahima Swami and underscored the irrelevance of gradation among sannyasis. Of course, this vignette was absent from Vishwanath Baba's Itihasa. A second example found the Guru reprimanding his followers for bickering over mundane and trivial issues like the relative position of the bark and the cloth as a garment of the renouncers. The bek garment, the Guru told his disciples, was only an external symbol, and a sannyasi's status was to be judged by the quality of his sadhana meditation. The disciples were reminded that cloth and bark were the same. According to the Kalpindhari text, the rules for initiation into the monastic order were unambiguous. One who desired to become a sannyasi had to renounce the world, live with a sannyasi, and develop his capacity for meditation, concentration, and spiritual pursuits, sadhan bhajan, before applying for sannyasi status. After the initiation, his status as a balkaldhari or kalpindari depended on the order of his preceptor. He was to wear a kalpin if the guru were a kalpindari and a balkal if he were a balkaldhari. This dress and the sannyasi status were to be fixed for life. The system of gradation and promotion was an unjust innovation of the second line of the balkaldaris. They were audacious characters, Ugra Swabhav, who compelled their guru to give them balkal and relegated their equals, the other kalpindaris, to a subordinate position. They only took possession of Gadi by force and not hesitated to resort to the law court to evict a senior sannyasi of their own order who had refused to recognize the new wearers of balkal from his separate living space within the Gadi compound. The text noted with relish that the devious ways of the balkaldharis had failed to bring them success. The triumph of Kalpindari efforts to establish a separate order was proudly proclaimed. The split between the two orders was not perceived as an impediment to the growth of the Dharma. Instead, the coming into being of the rival Samaj was hailed as the victory of right over wrong. The noble teachings of the founder had vanquished their subsequent misinterpretations. Mahendra Baba's Sankshipta Itihasa categorically stated that the wrong practices of the Balkaldharis made it impossible for the Kalpindaris to reach any agreement with the group and also turned the endeavors of law courts and arbitrators into a parody. The deviations of the Balkaldharis were in fact presented in the form of a manifesto. 1. The practice of the new Balkaldharis to regard living beings rather than Paramatma as Brahma. The practice of Saramanya, which disregarded barriers of age and respectability. The rejection of Ekakshara Omkar. The practice of changing over from Kalpin to Balkal. The use of Apara and Para in place of older terms. the refusal to allow Kalpandaris to perform nittis at the Gaddi, the resistance to an equal representation of the two samajas in the Mahima Dharma Parichalana and Prachar Samiti, Committee for the Management and Propagation of the Mahima Dharma. And then this chapter continues, but I think today we have read quite enough. And finally, from the OG Bernard Cohn, there's something about him in the footnote. He has shown how the procedure of law courts, which insisted on coming to a decision, wrought a change in customary methods of dispute settlement in which discussion and arbitration were given greater importance. A settlement in which some of the differences of the contenders were compromised was arrived at, but not a definite decision. Bernard Cohn, Some Notes on Law and Change in North India. Thank you for listening. Take care and keep practicing sadhana of your parampara.